You all have been really polite and loving to each other, right? Even when you have disagreements, but it's okay to disagree. And that's part of being a body, but also part of growing together and learning about this, right? I don't know all the answers. Pastor Mike will definitely say he doesn't know all the answers. So we need to be growing in this, okay? So today is, I think, our last one on sanctity of life. Now, I think when we hear that term, there's certain things that come in mind, but we'll talk through it. Can you go to the next slide, Aaron? Oh, keep going. I think you need to go to, yeah. There we go. Okay, so this is our statement. Keith, can I have you read it for us? Can you go back?
This one? Wait.
Yeah, that was right. Yep.
We believe human life begins at conception, and all human life is sacred. Each person possesses a right to life and protection from harm.
Okay, just double check. Any questions about this statement? Anything that's not clear? Any words that you need clarified? Conception is what? When a sperm and an egg come together, right? Any other questions about how we're defining this? Okay, let's look through the verses together. Genesis 1:27, who has that? Does anyone need Bibles, or are you all using your phones? Okay, up here, Nathaniel. One.
So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them.
Okay. So Genesis 1:27, how does that connect to what we're talking about here? Humans are created in God's image, right? And therefore have value, right? If God is valuable, then we should be valuable as well. Anything else? Okay. Exodus 20:13. Back there.
You shall not murder.
Okay. That's simple. How does that connect? Life is sacred. Life is important, right? You shouldn't take away a life, right? Okay. Psalm 139:13-16. Nina back there.
I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be.
Okay. How does that connect? Not just you, but together. How does that connect to this statement? Where do we, from Psalm 139:13-16, what do we learn from that passage?
The life we have is given to us by God.
The life we have is given to us by God. What else do we grab from that passage?
He created us the way we are with intent.
Right. He created us with intent, right, to who we are, right? So he created us with a purpose. When?
From the moment we were
In the womb. The passage specifically says in the womb, right? Right? Okay. Jeremiah 1:5. Thanks, Christine.
I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations.
Okay. Why is that verse listed here?
timing and purpose.
Timing and purpose again, right? So before birth, right? While you're still being formed. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, those are pretty straightforward verses to talk about both the value of all life, but specifically, we're also looking at unborn, right? I mean, that you all know that's a huge topic right now, a huge issue in our society about life. And so, as a church, this is our statement. We believe human life begins at conception and all human life is sacred. Each person possesses a right to life and protection from harm. So we need to unpack that. What does that mean for us? And what does that mean in our beliefs? And how do we talk about these issues with people who might believe differently, both in our lives, but maybe even in our church, right? So we need to think about that. Any questions first as we move forward with this?
Protection from harm. Can you unpack that? Or, I mean, because like some people may get martyred. Some people may serve in a job, whether military service, you know, that they specifically are putting themselves in harm's way. That's part of their calling and their job.
Yeah, I think it's this idea of things that are done to people, right? I think you make that good distinction that it's not that we believe no one should be in harm, right? Because I think God doesn't care if necessarily we get hurt or die, you know? I mean, that's not a problem for him necessarily because he loves us and he protects us ultimately. But I think this idea that, you know, it's not just, oh, someone's alive and they're okay, right? But they deserve, just like how we treat ourselves, right? Love our neighbor as ourselves, right? That they deserve a chance to be safe from harm. I think it's more that. I think so. Anyone, any other answers, ideas?
When I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, some of the missionary guys who were there, they say like how God ordained the authority to the state and with the military and law enforcement, how that's like kind of like given the right or justification for utilizing that force if necessary for any of like kind of like that harm way. So it's not necessarily like your personal relationship with Jesus, but more of like, okay, you're in this occupation, you have to fulfill this role if need be. So that's how they put it that way, because there are a lot of Christians in the military or in law enforcement, and then like how does that compare to like, okay, if you're in the situation that you have to take somebody else's lives, it's like, what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky. And that gets into a lot of interesting kind of theology about how God works through people and governments, like you said. So we'll see if we want to get into that today. But yeah, that's definitely a good, I mean, you know, what you were sharing is definitely something that people believe. Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to go into discussion into our groups. So break up into your groups. And here are just some ideas. I didn't want to keep it at like an easy level of like, what is, you know, should we love our neighbors or should we, you know, care for unborn? So we're gonna, you know, push this a little bit, and it might be a little bit controversial. And so again, we all are, even for young people, adults, right? So we can all, you know, talk about these things. If it feels very uncomfortable to talk about certain things, that's okay. You can skip that question. But these are probably not things that you've never heard about before or not issues in our world today. So let's think about how we can be the church in this issue and think about all these things, okay? And then we'll get back together and talk about it. So even if you get stuck on something or if there's no agreement, we can kind of hash it out together and work it out, okay? Have you guys has Pastor Mike been putting you into groups, or do you all just get into groups?
Get into groups.
Okay, so I'll trust you guys to find good groups, and I'll trust you guys to be talking and discussing, and then I'll trust that when we come back to you later on, that you'll share something that you talked about, okay? Deal? Okay, so maybe groups of, let's say, 4 or 5 at the most. And we'll take the next 20, 25 minutes. Good question. Sorry, before we begin, the term in question number 2, how does this issue affect our thinking about in vitro fertilization? So in vitro fertilization is fertilization of like an embryo, to create an embryo outside of the human body. So you would take the sperm and the egg and you would fertilize them together in, a lot of times people say a petri dish, but out, and then implant it back into the body. Oftentimes, this is controversial because oftentimes they do multiple eggs and they only implant some of them, and then some of them are frozen and then either just kept frozen forever or destroyed. So. Yeah, I do. more like right, you know, like. So just 5 minutes more? 5 minutes more. Just a warning.
That kind of rolls into the third one there, right? Like, so they're in and obviously that is mindset, right? Like, it's not just mom and dad, that are coming alongside and like supporting and hard times, celebrating good times.
Okay. Can I get everyone's attention? So, how was that discussion? It was a little heated at times? Okay. Why was it heated?
Well, it's sort of going back and forth.
Okay. A little discussion, not necessarily agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I warned you of with these secondary issues, is not everyone's going to agree. Unfortunately, there's been churches that have split over these issues, right? So we want to learn how to have unity even in spite of disagreements. Okay? So it's not easy. We don't like, I think in general, we don't like conflict, but sometimes discussion is good, right? And we need to learn to love each other. So good practicing, good noticing. Okay. Anyone else? I know I'm not actually asking about the topic. I'm asking you how it was, right?
Yeah. Lizzie threw curveballs at us, and it
Good
was
job, Lizzie.
hard to get a stance on them, but it was good to think about, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. We want smart believers here. We want you to wrestle with things and understand things, being able to see things from other sides, right? So giving you that opportunity. Tim came in and he said, I'm doing this all wrong. He said, I should be doing more teaching, but I think that we all know enough to be able to talk about these things. So let's go through quickly. And you may not have gone through all four, that's fine. What are ways that we can more value all humans as being made in God's image? What are some of the things you all talked about? Or questions that you might have. That's okay too. You can pass the mic back there.
I think a common thread that came up in our group was just you can condemn a behavior or a decision, but really love the person. And even if someone has made a decision like an abortion or something earlier in their life, that really, I mean, God still loves that person. And, you know, we all are in need of forgiveness and love. And there's a lot of nuance, and maybe not missing the fact that that can be a very just don't miss the heartache that maybe went into that decision.
Yeah, multiple things can be true at the same time, right? And I think we need to be able to hold that. And I just as I think you all have been good, but just, I should probably say in the beginning, just have a lot of grace. In this situation especially, there might be some who've actually experienced abortions. There might be some whose families might experience abortions. Some of you might have firsthand experience with in vitro fertilization, all these things. So we can talk about it, but remember, the person next to you might have firsthand experience that you don't know about. So be careful on how we talk, right? Have a lot of grace. And most of you are, all of you are doing this, I know that, so, but just, it's good to remind ourselves. Okay, anyone else? What are ways we can more value all humans as being made in God's image?
Recognizing that we all have been forgiven much, and so we can love much. God has shown us so much grace that when we see the depth and the just how much grace He has shown to us in saving us, we won't be pointing a finger at somebody else and saying, "You don't deserve grace, you don't deserve love," because He loved us enough to bring us into His kingdom, and so it's not for us to judge about how big somebody else's sin is because of our own yardstick, but looking at the magnitude of God's grace instead.
Yeah. I think we talked about, those verses talk about the value of human beings. And as humans, we sometimes forget that, especially online, right? When we don't see people face to face, we forget it's a real human being that we're talking about. When we put them in groups, right? Like those people, these people, right? They become nameless, faceless people. But really, each individual is made in the image of God, which means that they have value. That means that their souls are eternal, just like ours, right? We gotta remember that. Anything else on this question? What are ways we can more value all humans as being made in God's image? What is all humans? Let's just back up. Who is all humans? I know, but like, name some. People disagree with you. Even those? back there.
Like all humans who are like not, sharing the same characteristics or sharing the same like cultural background or even religious background or anything like that.
Yeah,
So
even the ones that are different than we are, right?
yeah.
And believe different things. Okay.
I heard this question in a slightly different way too, in that like we're different. Thank you. We have different abilities, different cognitive abilities, physical abilities, and whatnot, and disabilities. And I know that that's a reason sometimes people choose to make decisions about conception or not, or having a baby or not. And so one of the things a friend of mine taught me, I really appreciated when I was working under her. She said, whenever you meet someone, whenever you're working with someone, what's something you can learn from them? How did God create that person in such a way? And what can I learn from that? What's something that I can take away from them, regardless of any of these, what we perceive our differences?
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, definitely a lot more we can talk about, but I'm going to move ahead. Number 2, how does this issue affect our thinking about in vitro fertilization? Tom, do you want to?
Thanks. Well, I was planning to hold my son as a prop for this one. Our baby Benji actually was an embryo adoption. And I think a lot of people in the community maybe are familiar with that because there's a pastor in Woodbury who had a similar story. But basically, a family that does IVF and has leftover fertilized embryos can choose to put them up for adoption. There's a Christian organization we work with in Tennessee called the National Embryo Donation Society. They have a registry. They have in order to do this, there's a similar process as a live adoption where there's a home study, there's background checks. It's a pretty in-depth process to do it, but medically, it's actually very similar to an IVF, the implantation process. I think for me, and I think I would say I speak for my wife too, it's interesting because I think I do struggle a little bit with IVF when I think about those embryos getting left behind, but I can't very well condemn it because I'm so grateful that couple that we matched with did go through the process. I mean, they gave us a chance to have our son. And kind of going back to what I said earlier, I think some of these issues it can be easy to take a hard line and say this is wrong or I don't believe in this, but there's just so much nuance and there's so much. I think it goes back to just the need to bear with each other and try to approach these issues in love.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions? Or what do you guys all talk about in this issue? I know this is a little bit in the weeds, a little bit details about things, but it's important, right? I mean, if we're talking about life beginning at conception, so we have opportunities now to help families who can't have kids to have them in a different way, but that introduces other questions, right? Did you guys talk through this question? What did you all think about? How about the group back there? I know you have doctors in there too.
Yeah, so we talked about this issue, and I think, when new technology like IVF comes around, it initially just goes, right? And then issues arise, like what happens to the embryos. And then I would say ethical solutions or the need for ethical solutions arise. We see one with the embryo adoption. So I mean, that's how potentially we as Christians can probably inform the conversations, is when issues arise, how do we proceed, how do we inform it? So that's my thought.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking on that. So the doctor we worked with in Tennessee doesn't just do embryo adoptions, he also does conventional IVF. And as a Christian, he has basically changed his business practice in a way, how can I put this? He will only help a couple create the embryos that they would be able to implant right then. And the idea is it would be closer, I guess, to what a natural conception would look like, it just in the hopes that there wouldn't be embryos left behind. So there's more than one way to do IVF, I guess you could say.
Yeah. it brings up issues. And again, there's families in our church and around us who are considering IVF. And so we need to know how to support them, how to give them guidance, how to talk them through it, and how to help them answer some of these difficult questions. Because infertility is a big issue too that we need to be sensitive to, right? And so it's not always just black and white, right? The nuance. How do we find the nuance? How do we love one another? I think Nathaniel said it. Hi, Nathaniel. You know, how do we love God? How do we love our neighbors, right? The greatest commandment, right? How do we live that out in very complex things that aren't necessarily mentioned in Scripture, right? Okay.
Can I make one quick
Of course.
comment? And then I'm going to stop talking because I don't want to talk too much. So as an adoptive dad too, our eldest is conventional international adoption, I think we heard from people after losing our first was a baby that died. We heard from a lot of people who thought they were helping us, like, you can always adopt. And that phrase, I think that phrase should be taboo because adoption is wonderful. It's amazing. It's God's calling, I feel like, for us, if we are called to it. But it's not a calling for everybody, and it's not a realistic option for everybody. There's a lot of challenges to it, and it is not just an automatic stand-in for having a conventional pregnancy.
Thank you. Third question. If we say every child deserves to be born, what is our role in helping them?
Someone said it takes a village.
Can you say more, Lizzie?
It takes a village. I think we do this here at this church, but when somebody's baptized, there's this idea that we're now all responsible as brothers and sisters in Christ to help each other grow, to hold each other accountable. And that's the same with the kid. Like, when a kid is born, we have a responsibility as the community that knows the family, that knows the child, to be that example, to love on them, to help them when they need it, to, with parental permission, step in and do correction, because each family does that slightly differently. But yeah, like as Christians, we are a family. We are brothers and sisters in Christ. And so we need to be helping each other in that role as brothers and sisters in Christ. And we need a couple of crazy people in there too.
Even for families that might struggle with having a child, and we say, well, if you have a child, we'll help out. Is that our responsibility too? I'm not just pointing at you, but I'm just asking in general. We're nodding our heads. Was that?
I mean, I think so. I was telling this our youth group of youths that like if we are saying every child deserves to be born and has a right to life and deserves to be protected from harm, right? Then also, like, ideally, in a perfect ideal world, right, we should want also the families that are supporting them to also have the same rights to life and protection from harm. Obviously, that's sometimes really hard to do, but I think that I also think it's hypocritical to claim right to life for the child, but not also support the parents at the same time, because I think that is an unfair or complete abandonment of the parent at the same time, because that's really not loving people at all, and it makes it puts, like, I mean, I am a child, so I know that I'm a burden to my parents at some point, but I do not have children right now, so like I know that I am not burdened with children, and so like that is something that I am blessed with not having children in that sense. But like if I was forced to all of a sudden have a child, that is a huge burden, and if I didn't have support, I don't know how I would do that, speaking as not someone who has to worry about abortion.
Why don't you pass it back?
I was just going to say, for number 3, I think one thing that we can help people with their children is through paid family leave. So policies that help young families to have time to bond with their babies. I think in the U.S. there's no legal paid so you have job protected leave, I believe, for 12 weeks, but it's not paid leave. In Minnesota, I believe they now have paid family leave. I didn't get to take advantage of that with either of my kids. So with my first child, there was no paid medical leave. So I was with my now 10-year-old for 12 weeks, unpaid, and then you have to use your own vacation time. And then for my son, we had 6 weeks of partially paid leave. But for many families, like, they're trying to raise an infant, which is incredibly difficult with this financial deficit.
Yeah.
When I saw the question, it's like, if we say every child deserves to be born, what is our role in helping them? The way I saw it was like, as a church, perhaps like with policies. So if within the city or within the state or within federal government, if there's a vote between whether allowing policies that promotes, it's gonna be a little bit hard to say, but policies that promote make it a little bit more, I don't want to say it because it's hard to say, but you guys know what I'm trying to say. But it's, just having policies, being able to sway it. Is that one way that you can?
Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, definitely, the things we talked about, making sure that we have our voices out there and making sure that things that we believe to be true can happen. I mean, but it require us to step outside of ourselves and even our church, right? And we haven't traditionally done a lot of advocacy, but, that's something we could consider and think about. But yeah, I mean, if it is kind of similar to what Kristen said, to create policies that help families so that we can love them and give them what we say is true for ourselves, then yeah, definitely we want to do that.
I feel like this question also ties into what you were sharing this morning in your sermon, trust and obey. Part of that obedience is getting out of our little world, our little comfort zone, and coming alongside other people, right? Whether that's our brothers and sisters in Christ or our neighbors or our coworkers or whomever, if we see that need, that we can offer to be there and meet that need. And in doing so, we are sharing Christ with them and being challenged to grow in our own lives. And so, I feel like this is one specific way we can trust and obey, right? Is coming alongside. I was just thinking, my husband and I, this is our whole ministry. Our lives, we're always constantly coming alongside families. We have a friend who just got in a scooter accident. What can I do to help bring food to her? What can I do to get her kids to and from school? She's got 4 of them, one with physical needs or disabilities. And so how can we support them in this time? If I say that she, because she's a child too, and her children are valuable. And so oftentimes I feel like this question is really just saying, what can I do to get out of my comfort zone, out of my life, out of me, to be there for others? And I think that we're all called to do that in all of our lives in different ways.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, you all touched upon it here. It's easy when it's like Nathaniel, whatever, if Nathaniel needs something, we love him, so we'll do something for him. But what if it's someone that's anti-Nathaniel? That's the opposite of him. Doesn't believe or is against what we believe or against who we are or our enemies, right? Does Jesus tell us to love our enemies? But it's hard, right? How do we come alongside the people like that? We have to push ourselves to think about it, right? I mean, most of you know our family, we're a foster family, right? So we have kiddos that come to our house because their family situations are difficult. And it's not just we take care of kids and they're cute and whatever, but we deal with their families as well in the situations they're in, right? So they're going through treatment for substance abuse, then we're along for the ride in some sense. It's hard. Those aren't decisions that we made, but yet in order to support this child, we need to be able to come alongside them. And so it puts us into proximity next to people who we might not make the same choices. We might not do the same things. We might not believe in the same things, but that's what we're called to do, right? So it's hard. When you say something like, oh yeah, every child should be born, so we should help, it's a whole other thing when we actually have to do it. So, but it's good that we're able to talk through it. Last question. Why is abortion such a difficult issue even for people who agree that all human life is worth protecting? A little bit of me pushing you to think outside your comfort zone, pushing you to think about the other side of things. Why is abortion such a difficult issue?
You're electric. Abortion is such a polarizing and personal topic. And people feel very strong for it one way or the other. And I read a poem years ago, and the only part I remember out of it was, do we condemn the woman who just had an abortion, or do we grieve with the lady who just suffered a loss? It's about perspective. And we don't always want to, people might be angry with this, put our money where our mouth is. If we're against abortion, to say that publicly, regardless of the consequences, is hard. But that doesn't mean we don't stop loving the people that had to go through that choice. What he said earlier, like, you can disagree with the choice and still love the person. But I think it's really hard for us to do that sometimes, which is why it becomes such an issue.
How about this group here?
We didn't get this far. We got to trying to define what in vitro fertilization is.
Okay.
We also only got to the in vitro fertilization. But I think a lot of our conversation went to why the conversation is so difficult, which is a lot of people kind of just are on a side and they just talk past each other. They're not even arguing the same points. So the one we got to was, okay, well, where do people think life starts? And we're just sharing like answers from different perspectives people have heard. And some people say, oh yeah, it's conception. Others, it's a heartbeat at 15 days, I think it was. 2 days. Another 15 days, yeah, okay. Others were brain activity or birth and on, right? So people might agree that, oh yeah, you should have an abortion when it's a person, but people might just disagree on what point does it become a person, right? So I think understanding where people you're talking with are coming from with their points, so you two are actually having the same conversation and you're not arguing two completely different points. Yeah.
And then something to add with that, we also talked about this, was like Nathaniel brought up how it's like with like law and policy, you can only intervene or just like kind of punish people for that. So that's kind of hard in policies to kind of like, there's no like black and white to abortion. It's like so contextual where like you have to really know the person, know what they're going through and the background to all of that. So that's one of the main issues too.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you just said. Originally I had a question about like, do we criminalize like abortion? Like what is our stance on that? And that's a whole other question. But yeah, I mean, it's just interesting is not even the right word. It's challenging to think of. Any other comments? Any other thoughts?
I have one, and I'm not sure that I'll be very articulate with this, but I spent my teaching career teaching in a very urban setting, and you have families where there's a lot of chaos, there's multiple fathers, whatever. And those kids, they have meaning and they have worth to their life as well. And how do we address the lives of the kids that are already born? And that's not a context that we interact with a lot, but there's a ton of little kids and big kids and adolescents that need truth and love spoken into them. And how do we, as a church, address that as Christians? And also, there's more to it than that, but that's where I'm sort of thinking about.
No, it's really important. That's why I try to, in the beginning, try to say, like, when we see the word sanctity of life, we tend to think like unborn, but really we're talking about all of life, right? It includes those who are already born, right? And so it's important to make sure we think about life in that context, not just the unborn, which is important, but it's more than that.
And well, probably gonna get a lot of heat for this. Well, when I was at I think it was 2022 or 2023 March for Life rally, there was a lady that was speaking that saying that she read the abortion and all that after a guy raped her and all that. And well, for what she pointed out, that she felt like there was a anvil about ready to drop. And the moment that that anvil dropped on her, when she found out that the guy that molested her was released out of prison 2 months later.
Yeah, I mean, there are other questions we could have talked about in case of rape, incest, things like that, right? I mean, we know that those are challenging situations where abortion, there's a lot of discussion about whether abortion should be allowed in those cases. And it's hard. It's hard to kind of think through. And this is the effects of a sinful world. And so we are called to come alongside people and help them through those times. And so I think it's important to, again, have grace and love and understand that unless we're in those person's shoes, it's hard to really kind of understand and judge and say you should do this or that. So all of that, we want to make sure we keep in mind as we kind of navigate through situations like this. This was not meant to be like a heavy kind of talk. It was most to kind of introduce this topic and to think about it and realize that there's a lot that we still need to learn as a body together, right? And so I'm thankful for people like Tom and Sarah who can share their experiences, right? Others who can share their experiences, and we need to be able to know how to do that. Like I said in the beginning, these secondary issues are not just, we know the right things to think and the right things to teach. I think a lot of it is understanding that we need to learn a lot of grace for how we think about these things that aren't primary issues. And we need to know how to talk about these things in a nuanced way and not just like, it's this or that. Or even if we believe that, to just push other people to think the same way. That is not what these are for, right, Tim? The secondary issues are not for us to say this is the right way to do things, this is the wrong way to do things. It's to bring up so that we have common practice and we know how to kind of think through at least what the leadership thinks about that.
There's a little bit of pressure to think of certain ways, but it's good to talk about it too and be able to.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Oh. It's really short.
So, on the topic of the very difficult situations when there's been like rape or incest, the Radiance Foundation, led by, I can't remember his name right now, but is somebody who was born through rape, and he has a ministry. That's something people might want to look up, Radiance Foundation.
Thank you. Okay, why don't we close in your groups and just either select one or two people to pray, and then we'll close our time that way. Thank you.